Guys, we're in the next part. Please go check out the previous part to gauge your bearings. But just a small little summary of the previous part, just in case you were not there. I was speaking in that part about how it is that we are in the last days, and because of that, evil is going to be at an astronomical level prior to the rapture of the church, and that this evil is going to basically put Christians in a position to get to the end of themselves. And this extension of our strength to the very end of itself is the measure of grace that God is going to be giving us, especially in the last days, because of how evil our societies are going to be. We're going to have the same level of strength, for instance, as a woman or man suffering severe Christian persecution in a hostile nation to the gospel, like Iran, for instance, or the United Arab Emirates, etc. So because of how much God is going to callous our hearts, not in a negative fashion. I spoke about how in the same way that God calluses or sears the consciences of the wicked to do wickedness without feeling much, their consciences get taken away. God is going to enable us to embrace or endure pain in a calloused state, where it is that we will be endured through so much of it that calluses are going to form around the reception of such pain, such that it does not hurt as much as it used to. And take it from me, as one who has been suffering for almost a decade in apathetic conditions that are cold and Arctic. Nobody cares about me, frankly. I went from basically feeling entitled, given that I grew up relatively okay, loved and pampered. I went from looking at the way that my family treats me, like, how could you do this to me, to now just expecting it. I no longer expect affection. I no longer expect compassion. I no longer expect regard for my person. I expect, rather, that I'm going to be treated like trash. That is a callous. And that callous has enabled me to take the blow of apathy that has come in my general direction, the disregard for my person, that even though God said it is not good for man to be alone, and so he made Eve for Adam, these people disregard that. They disregard that solitude is not of God at all, and yet they've put me in a position to live in somewhat of a solitary confinement, metaphorically or allegorically. I've lived alone in loneliness and solitude for much too long for a human being, and instead of dying, I have rather adapted. Like the kid in the Jungle Book that gets raised by animals, I have adapted to living with insentient beings that have disregarded their own emotions and what is right according to society, and that what is my life is about to become the lives of so very many Christians in countries where they initially are going to be like, how could you do this to me? How in the world could you treat me like that? Come on, it's me. That's how I used to think in the beginning of my persecution. It's me, it's Karabo. How dare you do this to me? I was so feisty and I had so much energy to fight the structures that are hurting the living daylights out of me, because I lived in a country that up until the time when they did what they did to me, just frankly could be handled for doing that to me. Justice was always available to me. Equity, my voice, projecting it, was always heard. Until one day, I just stopped getting listened to. It's like I was sitting in a soundproof room while talking to anyone in this country at all. And the shock was immense. However, I overcame it by callousing myself to the fact that now my voice no longer matters. And so now I work to do this work to try and snatch people out from the flames of hell. But I'm not trying to patch South Africa up together anymore. I have stopped trying to get South Africa to recover from its insanity, because I realize it's never going to happen. Things are ramping up so badly and culminating towards the very end of the ages that there is no turning back from the state that we are in now. It's literally the point of no return. And I'm trying to help the body of Christ at present that is listening to me understand that the Lord is allowing that level of wickedness to intensify before he takes us out. It's going to be very hard, okay? Because he is developing calluses in us to turn the other cheek, but the purpose of increasing that wickedness before even the rapture happens is to rescue some people, because as a result of an incredible amount of wickedness intensifying across the earth, more and more people are going to be disquieted with the prospect of atheism, because there will to them be no other alternative to deal with the increasing evil on the earth other than to believe in a God. So it's going to turn people to God, meaning that our sole prerogative and responsibility as a body of Christ in these last days is not so much to patch up or fix our governments, because that's never going to happen, but rather to snatch souls from out of the flames. I went on right ahead to describe how it is that our world right now is much like a sinking ship, kind of like the Titanic. And when a ship is sinking, it is not wise to try and patch the ship together to rescue everyone that is on the ship, but rather it is ideal to try and get as many people as possible out into lifeboats, that once the ship sinks, as many souls as possible have been salvaged. So at this point, there is no fixing our governments. At this point, there is no fixing even our local environments, our families, our units where we live inside, sheltered family trees. There's no fixing that. And I say this biblically because the scriptures are clear that the Lord has come upon the earth not to bring peace, but a sword, division. And from now on, a man's enemies will be members of their own households. From now on, a man's enemies will be members of their own households. All right? This situation is going to continue to happen and happen all the way up until the end of the ages. And when then we get to the height of such a thing as this, it means it's pointless to try and patch up your actual family unit or a society of families. It is rather worthwhile to try and evangelize individual members of your family, to try and get as many of them as you possibly can to be with you. Since that sword that divides will make sure that mother and daughter are separate. Daughter-in-law and mother-in-law hate each other. Father and son can't stand each other. Yours in a family like that is to try and gather for yourself the son, gather the dad, so that when the son is at enmity with the dad, at least you're in fellowship with the dad. So we are literally creating a divide. We are to work towards the division, however, to add as many people in this divide into our side. We are to try and snatch people for our side, because that's the ark of Noah that is going to take man to their judgment, but for a small remnant. Okay, so that division is what it is that ought encourage or inspire the believers, the body of Christ, to rather focus on getting people to make the rapture as opposed to trying to fix your countries. And that's literally, I've been summarizing for 7 minutes. It's like ridiculous, but I don't like to just like carry on from where I left off, because I know some people only listen to this video only and not the rest. So the context helps to keep them engaged. All right. Now, all these agendas, all these ideologies that are being pushed down our throats on earth right now that are bizarre. Like literally, there's no better description for them. All these bizarre ideologies that are being shoved down what used to be a sober human race are crazy. And there are so many people rising up, complaining, lamenting against these bizarre ideologies, because they're exactly that, bizarre. But there is also so much pushback against these bizarre ideologies, not against, sorry, but for these bizarre ideologies, that you can successfully trust that just like ultimately slavery was abolished, ultimately women's rights were acknowledged in history, where now women can vote and they can roam these streets freely without a guardian or whatever. In the same way that those movements that historically were so resisted finally got exactly what they wanted, so too is this colorful agenda, so too is the killing of babies, so too is etc. They are currently trying to equate the colorful agenda, the alphabet agenda, with women's liberation and racial oppression. They're trying to make them look the same. And we all who are sober know that that's not the same thing. The Lord never intended for women to stay in captivity, unable to vote, unable to get a say in their lives. Neither did the Lord ever intend for black people to stay slaves or any other racial demographic that has experienced that. The Lord never intended for those who are in captivity to stay in captivity. His was to come to set the captives free. But it is not captivity to feel like you were born with a different gender from the one that you identify with. That is a highlighted sin in the scriptures. It is called that. And never mind just the Holy Bible, but most, if not all, religious texts that are older than 100 years agree very ubiquitously that the colorful or the alphabet agenda ideology is a sin. It's a sin. So these structures are against all religions other than those that are fluffy and have been innovated just day before yesterday. And because they are trying to align them or compare them to things like Black liberation movement, things like women's liberation movement, because they're trying to make them look like they're the exact same thing, and that even though there might be some stubborn, rebellious, recalcitrant naysayers, they will eventually get on board. They are looking at these horrific agendas that are nihilistic, have no regard for God and established principles in the human race. They are going to succeed. That's what the Lord has shown me. And I touched on this briefly in my previous parts. In my previous series. They are going to succeed to convert this travesty and this abomination into the kind of success that women's liberation is, that Black oppression, overcoming that is. They are going to succeed to get to a time where it is frowned upon to even so much as like have a discussion about allowing a person born with male parts to partake in female sports. It's not going to be an issue up for debate anymore. In the same way that slavery is no longer up for debate. It's a crime that you will get arrested for if you do it. It is frowned upon ubiquitously by everybody. And the day is going to arrive. You can trust that. If the restrainer is not taken out of the way and God judges the world, if God does not supernaturally limit this thing, the day would arrive. It would inevitably come when this particular agenda would look no different in its success to transform society and culture than women's liberation and Black oppression, systematic oppression. Nobody in their right mind would ever come on mainstream media today and proudly flail their Black slave in front of you, calling them kunta and saying, go and get me a tray of chamomile tea. Go quickly before people see you. I don't want them seeing a Black in my house. I mean, nobody would ever come and do that in waking life and not have some kind of a global backlash come at them. Indeed, the day is going to arrive when nobody can successfully come on mainstream media anywhere at all, on any platform, and say, how dare this person born with male parts use my bathroom? For you to say that would be like a white man in the 21st century saying, meet my slave kunta kinte. It would be so taboo and so just revolted against that this man will not only be facing prison, but likely even murder in that prison from people who are trying to handle him in that prison. The day is coming, human beings, when the colorful agenda is going to be as embraced in all of its completeness, with all of its facets and its nuances and different colors, including the pedophilic component of it. The day is going to arrive, if God does not restrain this rubbish, when it's going to be looked at like an overcoming generation of previously persecuted, systematically oppressed people. So I'm trying to help you in so stating such a thing as this. Understand that it is pointless currently to even push back against it because they're gonna win. The Lord has made it clear to me that all that the pushback is achieving is winning people for Jesus, but not so much society for sobriety. Evidences are already stark in media. Look at how mainstream organizations are disregarding, for instance, what happened in the United States of America with the brand Anheuser-Busch with Bud Light in featuring that trans guy, Dylan Mulvaney. You saw how their sales tanked. That is something that happened. And to this day, Bud is still experiencing severity of losses because of it. But that did not stop Maybelline from partnering with the same guy. It did not stop Miller from pontificating some other woke agenda in their adverts. It did not stop some South African fashion designer from coming up with swimwear for the transitioning community that still has a whole male bulge in front of them, but like in bikinis and full bodysuits, and putting it on Instagram. Like, people are revolting and they're standing up against these agendas, yet these companies are still coming back saying, I don't care. I don't care. I don't care if, I've got an example to look at with Anheuser-Busch to not do this because I am a company and as a going concern, I cannot afford to lose sales. It does not matter. For them, it is it's collateral damage or like pruning. They look at it as pruning. Like, when you prune a tree and then it bears more fruit because you pruned it. So to them, it's a process of cutting that is going to hurt initially, but ultimately it's going to yield fruit. And you know what, guys? It will yield fruit. And I'm going to explain this to you from a statistical vantage point. We are in 2023, and in this year, something like 22% of Generation Z children, youth, identify as the alphabet agenda. If you just rewind 10 years ago, that figure was sitting at around, I think, 18 or 17%. And then go back yet another 10 years, and it was sitting at an even more abysmal figure, like 10% or something. In increasing measure, children are identifying as this community. They are experimenting with ideologies from this community. I was listening to this one guy by the name of what's his channel? Michael Knowles, right? Walk on the Daily Wire. And he covered a topic that just, like, to this day, my forehead is still creased. I don't understand how that's even a thing, but it is, right? He was covering a topic about there is a form of pornography. I think it's called sissy pornography. And I think it is pornography involving the colorful agenda. And it apparently has got something hypnotizing in it that upon viewing it, men, when they watch this particular type of pornography, get hypnotized into suddenly wanting to become females, all the way to the point of transitioning. And there is a man who came forward that is detransitioning, so he regrets having all of his parts cut off, that commented, that basically gave his testimony and said that he was lulled to sleep and given these desires that he never originally had, to be a female and to lay with men as a man after watching this kind of pornography. And upon being interviewed further, he interviewed this one lady that basically is an advocate, an activist, against such things as these. And this lady was speaking about how it is that these people the algorithms of these pornographic sites are such that people are not necessarily watching what kind of pornography that they generally like to watch, and that's being recommended to them. But every so often, there will be something shoved down their throats through the algorithms with this hypnotizing type of pornography that then upon watching it, that should cause men to steer clear from porn, really. And even women, upon watching it, they then all of a sudden are lured in, and it's kind of trance-like, and it's hypnotizing. And after months of watching it, or however long the season is, they then come out on the other side with desires to transition, to chop off their manhood, to become girls. And all I could think about was that assistant digger, Mr. Beast, who was a total dude, one day. And then he just woke up and decided to go and divorce his wife, abandon his child. As a dad, not abandoned, but now he's trying to put shoes, girly shoes, on a boy child. All right, a son. This guy, this Mr. Beast assistant woman, man, whatever's going on there. All that this guy, Michael Knowles, said was, it makes me wonder if that's not what happened to Mr. Beast's assistant. A man that was totally anti this agenda, to a point of even speaking against it, and now he is transitioning. Apparently there is a kind of pornography that is hypnotizing men into changing their gender identity, all the way to the point of taking hormones and transitioning altogether to becoming women. So, of course, then addiction to pornography, which is a whole global epidemic right now, is going to then lead certain men and women into certain portions of porn sites that then are going to change their minds about their gender identity, their sexual identity. And that then will magnify. Some of the people who get addicted to porn are as young as 12, 11 years old. So it is no wonder then that the Generation Z kids, 22% of them now today identify as this agenda. Is it not addiction to porn that has done this to them and hypnotized them into it? And is it not also so much pushing of marketing of this agenda to a point where they are now experimenting with it? And make no mistake, experimentation can bring demons into an ecosystem. So if you experiment with kissing a girl in the girl's bathroom, even though you are completely straight, 5 years down the line, you might just actually be bisexual because of that experiment. I personally have had an attempt at recruitment into becoming bi or lesbian in the past prior to coming to Christ. I resisted because I found the girls creepy for trying, alright? I have had 2 girlfriends when I was in high school, French kiss in the girls' bathroom because they were playing truth or dare. And one of my friends dared them to kiss and they did. Stuff like that. You'll be thinking you're playing. But then, because there are so many demons and you're in a climate of this particular agenda being proliferated, you then find yourself having affections for a woman when you historically did not have them as a woman, and vice versa. So you can trust, therefore, that in increasing measure as the years progress, that this particular agenda will no longer be at 22% for the Gen Zs, but the Gen Alpha, apparently there's a new generation now on the scene. Gen Alpha will then become 30% of them that identify towards it. And the next generation, you get my point. It's going to get so bad that so many people in our society are going to identify with this particular movement. And so us who are trying to hold on to what is right and what is good and what is wholesome, let love be genuine, hold fast to what is good, abhor what is evil. Those of us who are trying to latch on to that are going to be so greatly outnumbered as time progresses that we are no longer going to have a chair, a seat to speak out on this. So God has made it clear to me that the mission now, honey, is to snatch souls out from the flames, help them make the rapture. but not so much to try and fix society, because that's not happening. It's the days of Sodom. And so therefore I am going to cut those days short. I'm not going to let the alpha generation of kids that are being born get to a point where 40% of them now identify as the colorful agenda. That is not a world that I will tolerate. So those of you who are alive in this very tail end of these immense travesties, evangelize like no man's business. Take evil not in your stride, but callous your hearts to being disquieted by it. And just work hunkered down to snatch souls. Because all that's left now is to snatch souls and not so much to patch up or fix governments. It's not going to change. Let's move to the next part, guys.